could you really be in this town?
I'm going to tell you at least one thing you don't know about Silent Hill 2 today. We live in an age of remakes and remasters. Many of them are not very good. The Silent Hill 2 remake, however, is not one of those. I dare say it's probably the best remake of a game that I've played. And taken in concert as a whole, it's one of the best video games I've ever played. But how much of that is because of what it was built off and how much is on its own merit is part of what we'll be discussing, alongside a connection to a story that might have inspired this game that I've literally never heard anyone talk about, so who knows. I might tell you something about this game that nobody's figured out since the original 20 years ago. But we've got a lot of work to do before we get to all of that. Because one thing I want to make clear right away is the purpose of this video is pretty expansive. Because there are a million Silent Hill 2 videos out there, and a lot of them are generally doing kind of similar things, I'm going to analyze it in my own way, independent from what everyone else says about it. Because most video essay style videos on games end up feeling like, when it comes to the actual analysis, people just read off the wiki page, in essence, or are otherwise too concerned to stay within the general milieu of how a thing is viewed. So I'm going to do my own thing. Maybe my conclusions will be similar to ones you've heard before, maybe not. But regardless, they're going to be my own. So welcome to my own interpretation of the Silent Hill 2 remake, alongside a crazy connection that is still insane to me, nobody has ever figured out before. So to build everything up, we've got to run through the game from the perspective of not already knowing what's going on, and then at the end, we're going to put all the pieces together and ideally end up with an analysis that is at least moderately decent. So the original Silent Hill 2 is one of the most celebrated games of its time, and for good reason. It's difficult, it doesn't hold your hand, and it deals with a lot of uncomfortable subjects that even much edgier pieces of media either stay away from or handle without nearly as much subtlety and nuance. Silent Hill 2 is a complex game, and there's a reason people were still talking about it during the 23-year interim between its release and its remake's release just last year. I do not envy Bloober Team, the creators of this remake. When restarting a franchise or making a remaster, one has to contend with the infinitely, impossibly high expectations people are going to have for you. They do not want a modest upgrade nor a mere technical step up. They don't want the game to be better than it was. They want the game to be better than they remember it as having been, and that is a very different thing. And that is one reason why my perspective is probably going to be a little different. I have played the original Silent Hill 2, but that spans back in a measure of months as opposed to years or even decades. I don't have nostalgia for the original game, even though I absolutely adore it, and it's probably one of my favorite games ever alongside Silent Hills 1 and 3. That being the case, I don't have years of expectations. This remake was already out and available before I'd played a single Silent Hill game, and though I mostly avoided paying attention to any of them until I actually played through them, I still kind of knew what it looked like. We're about done with the prelude here, but it's all just said to say that I came in here with sort of different expectations than a lot of people did. And because talking about Silent Hill 2 is hard. This game has such a reputation, it's so brilliantly written, it's so densely packed with details that there's no way I can write this and cover everything in this script. But we'll try. The brilliance and denseness of the game is even contained in its opening scene. I almost wrote, the opening scene is famous for a good reason, but that doesn't actually tell you anything. It just says the same thing that everybody says about it, that it's good. So let's actually talk about why it's good. We don't know anything at the opening of the game. If we know anything at all, it's only back-of-the-box information. We're aware James is here looking for his dead wife. It's an admirable, if mystery-laden goal, but the opening is great because it conveys the emotions of the game in microcosm. We get Akira Yamaoka's ghostly synthy tunes, the darkness, and a reflection. Mirror reflections are powerful symbols, as I'm sure you know. They're a sign, most relevantly, of introspection, self-analysis. The first thing we see is his shaking hands, his quivering face, his unsure stare into the mirror. Nothing is said, nothing is ham-fistedly explained. His eyes are obscured by shadow. He touches his face as if to know that it's real. It's slow, it's uncomfortable, it's trepidatious, perhaps. There's a sign of something being wrong from moment one. Mary, could you really be in this town? And an aggressive synthy wave. I could make a whole damn video about this opening and all that it means when all is said and done. And when we're further along, we're going to come all the way back here and explain what even this first 30 seconds of the game means. But once we exit the bathroom, we are brought out to Mary's little monologue, that famous one, "In my restless dreams I see that town, Silent Hill."
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you.
She's waiting for him. James acknowledges the strangeness of the situation, but he's so drawn to this potential hope of his wife's survival that he'll accept this far-flung chance. And there's so much we don't know, so much lack in the setup so purposefully. Silent Hill is better than most franchises at conservation of detail. We don't know the date, the real-life location is between de-emphasized and non-existent, and nothing is actually said of James's life before the game starts. All we're given to work with is that he's a guy looking for his wife that died 3 years ago, and the lack of excess detail beyond that makes what little we have all the more important, all the more loaded. And you'll notice James's oddities very quickly. Even when questioning the letter, he says, "What could she mean?"
Our special place. What could she mean?
As if buying the idea Mary wrote it. What could she mean? Even more than is implied by the fact that he's actually here in Silent Hill looking. He doesn't question the weird sounds in the woods as he walks down the path. All these sorts of things kind of build up. We also meet a girl in a graveyard who will become recurring, and she's looking for her mother. One thing that was very important to me coming into this remake, even though, as I said, I was open to accepting changes between the original and the remake, was the maintenance of the surrealness of the original, and a large part of that was found in the dialogue, which this game actually expanded in a lot of areas. I highlight this to say that the way this conversation goes, with the girl talking about there being something wrong with this town, just sounds a bit off in of itself, and there's just this surreal feeling to everything. The exchange is meant to be abnormal, subtly abnormal, but still. And James doesn't really care about the potential danger that the girl says he might be walking into. He's willing to experience that danger, but he's also not brave enough to say why he's doing it to this girl. What she tells him is that she's looking for her mother, as well as her father and her brother. It seems their quests are kind of similar. All of this is failing to beg the almost countless questions one might have at this point about what's actually going on. Why was the main road into town blocked? Why is this random girl the only person that we see as we enter? We might be tempted not to think about all of these because we already know going in what Silent Hill 2 is going to be like, and so we accept these oddities as givens. But think about this from the perspective of James. Wouldn't all of these be, red flags, for lack of a better term? There are obvious signs of human habitation, but there are no people. I really want to hammer in, and will probably continue to do so, how important it is that this game, OG or remake, refuses to answer these kinds of questions. We are driven so thoroughly to seek out answers for everything ourselves all the time. We're used to having everything explained to us. Everything must have lore, deep and intricate, and in front of our faces at all times. This game does not work that way. Some things are not for us to know. No things, however, are on accident. Not here. That includes even this sort of strange flower shop message. I know who's being talked about here, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, even though I'm very tempted to do so. But the next actual important thing to talk about is James's first encounter with one of the lying figure enemies. His only real response after encountering this horrific nightmare is to say, "Is this the thing I saw in the fog?"
Is this what I saw in the fog?
Now, at this point, I could understand if you preempted what you think I'm about to say with, "But J. Bart, this is a completely normal interaction for a piece of horror. You can't have James have a whole existential crisis about this kind of encounter. It'd ruin the mood." And you're right, but also, James's muted reaction to essentially proof of the supernatural works even without suspension of disbelief, or without the general horror conceit of we can't expect characters to freak out about the supernatural being real every time because it'd be played out boring and sort of break the fourth wall every time it happened. It makes sense without giving these conceits because fundamentally, if you don't already know this, Silent Hill 2 is an incredibly introspective interior game to James. In essence, he doesn't freak out because we're seeing hints of his mental state already, his shaking hands in the beginning, his odd stare into the mirror, his willingness to face an unknown danger for the potential of seeing Mary. We already believe this would not faze him, and of course, there's much more determining the state of his mind we'll discover in time. But even for now, it's good to know that James is not written like a conventional video game character in the sense that you are expected to keep up with him and what's happening to him, and he's not going to explain it to you. He's not a blank slate, he's not an audience stand-in, he has things going on that you won't be told if you aren't paying attention, which I emphasize now as I have with every digression I've made thus far, and I'm trying to make fewer of them, because this factor matters all the way to the game's endings, which... here's my other unique take on the game I'll tell you a little bit early. I do think this game has a singular most canon ending in terms of what actually fits the best, and figuring out which it is entirely depends on your ability to understand what's going on with James. Heck, your ability to understand anything about this game at all is to a relevant degree going to hinge on understanding James. This also tracks for a lot of the sort of gamey stuff we do, namely the puzzle solving. We're first greeted by the idea that we need to fix a record, and then fix the jukebox that you put the record in, and then put said fixed record in said fixed jukebox. Why are we doing that when we're looking for our wife? In other games in this genre, namely Resident Evil, and I'm not dogging on Resident Evil, I love the series, we find ourselves in similar situations having to do riddles and such to progress through dangerous areas when blowing open a window or simply finding a different way around would seem more logical than engaging with some obscure puzzle. We know Raccoon City PD in Resident Evil 2 is only set in a former museum because it allows for a little bit more plausibility for all the weird puzzles you have to solve and artifacts you have to collect, even if it does make less sense if you think about it too much. But the tone of Resident Evil games makes it so that this slight implausibility isn't actually a problem, nor a flaw. Silent Hill's tone does this differently in a really important way. By establishing James's less than standard mental state right away, at least if you're paying attention, and greeting us with the absolute strangeness of Silent Hill, the presence of these odd fetch quests and James's inability to question them not only starts making more sense, but kind of fits that surreal feeling as if he's in a dream. Why is he doing this? Well, some way, somehow, it's the way forward towards Mary. And of course, once we fix that jukebox and it plays a song James remembers, we get our first real solid evidence that this is not going to be a Resident Evil-like experience. This record was there for him, for James Sunderland, specifically to find and to fix. It didn't just happen to be the guy sent for the job. All of this is meant for him. And that takes us in our next direction, towards the park, but also shows again James's odd lack of questioning this, sort of floating along, further forward, almost not lucid towards why he's being sent to do these things. And in order to get to the park that he remembers, we have to pass through the Woodside Apartments. This is one of our first big locations to clear. We reveal the coin puzzle and start exploring rooms looking for the coin so that we can actually solve it and move forward. It's extremely dark in here, so the quickly located flashlight comes in handy, just in time to illuminate what becomes obvious is Mary's outfit. We haven't seen much of it outside of branding materials and all that sort of thing at the moment, but that is what it is, another hint that James's journey is just for him. We also get a quick reference to Walter Sullivan, who in this game is essentially a world-building component, which is to say a murderer, but he's also our first indication towards the town's generally less than silent history, but I also throw it out there because he is a pretty big presence in Silent Hill 4, and I didn't remember that he was actually referenced in 2, so there's that, I guess. We find an oddly barred hallway and reach for the keys on the other side, only to get our foot stepped on by a random child, our second encounter with a living person here in Silent Hill. This child, unsurprisingly, will be important later. It isn't until we've been exploring the apartments for a good while that as we're making our way down a corridor, we encounter the infamous Pyramid Head. This got me pretty good, I must say. And that is one thing I do specifically want to give the remake credit for relative to the original. Part of me figured I'd be able to anticipate several of the scares just because I remembered where they were in the original game, but the remake actually uses that expectation against you frequently, putting these scares at similar times, but often slightly earlier or slightly later, such that it either catches you completely off guard because you don't think it's going to happen for a bit, or you end up waiting in tension for long enough that you sort of think it won't happen until inevitably it does. And I also want to laud the way that Pyramid Head is introduced. He doesn't have a jump scare or a loud, dramatic entrance complete with all the classical horror music cues. Instead, you just get your radio used to indicate oncoming enemies to start buzzing up with static as you'd expect when entering a new, potentially dangerous corridor. And then there he is. He doesn't break into chase, doesn't make any loud noises or anything. He just stands there on the other side of the bars, letting you walk right on up to him to get a nice look. Unreactive. And it's so much more effective at making him creepy, especially with his just odd design. We find a handgun in a shopping cart not long after. You can make of that what you will. It is pretty drippy though, Beretta with wood grips, very nice. After re-entering a room that did not look this way before, we find the dead man by the TV. Not in quite the same place as in the OG, and so once again, I was pretty surprised to see him here. In the OG, he was meant to look like Harry Mason from Silent Hill 1, though I think that was mostly just an Easter egg. But here you can't actually take the cloth off his head, which does make sense, because if you did and it showed Harry Mason's face in this game, it'd be less of a cute Easter egg and more, here's how Harry Mason is going to look in the inevitable Silent Hill 1 remake, don't worry about why he's here specifically, and I think it'd have just worked a lot less, so I get why that's not here this time. Another feature of this game that I haven't been speaking too much about are the random notes left around everywhere. I mentioned the Walter Sullivan one, but there are many that are significantly less clear in terms of why they exist or who they're for. And but one of those is this one. It isn't directed towards anyone named, it's not signed, and yet it's still here for us to find. At this stage, maybe not, but by game's end, we'll know who even this was by and for. After making our way through a dark room with mostly nonsensical scribblings on the wall, we end up encountering the third real person in this town, Eddie. He's in the bathroom of an apartment no more than 15 feet from a dead body in the fridge, and he's not having a great time. His purpose for being here is a lot less clear. He's not from town, but James understands intuitively that something brought Eddie here. He's here for some reason, and Eddie agrees with that assessment. It seems like James is pretty on top of the situation then. He's about where the audience is, as we understand. He's sort of starting to get that Silent Hill doesn't just happen to people, it always brings you. There's always some reason for it. But of course, the nature of what these reasons are is still very unclear. James knows there's something wrong with the town and that it's dangerous, but why that is remains elusive. We advance further through a window and out into the pool area of the apartment. There are a ton of enemies out here and a stroller in the middle of the pool with a snake coin in it. Just taking note of this for later because there's not much to make of this right now. Though I might say this is a portion of how this game takes advantage of horror to give you hints towards things without actually making it obvious that it means something. A lot of things that in their strangeness you'd naturally just write off as being there to be creepy actually do have a meaning behind them that you're probably just going to write off if you don't actually stop and think. I mean, you don't want to take that too far, of course, though. I mean, I'm pretty sure the juice carton called the Bloody Apple is probably just there for creepiness' sake. But what if I told you it's a metaphor for the garbage? But due to throwing said juice carton down the garbage chute and knocking down the last coin for the coin puzzle loose, we can now tackle that particular riddle. It has 3 stages revolving around the man/sword coin, the woman/gravestone coin, and the serpent/flower coin. This is probably my favorite puzzle in the game and richly laden with symbolism, so we'll have tons to say about it later. Also, the ambiance here is just perfect. I mean, I'm up there as one of Akira Yamaoka's top simps, but it really is great. The puzzle's tale details a man abandoning his love to a serpent, him striking a flower that grows near her gravestone, which he then kneels next to as the serpent, the one who slew her, still slithers upon the ground. But at the end of the puzzle, we get a really interesting line. The beast that from death and decay had spawned, he who has failed, she who's now beyond, now you pass the judgment on figures of play and choose where the burden of sin doth lay. This is a tricky one, and I'll give you something of my complete thoughts early in part by saying that this is not actually part of the puzzle. You've already solved it at this point. You can't get it wrong. There's no wrong answer. But there actually is a wrong answer and an okay answer and a correct answer. Any coin you put in will advance the puzzle, but only one of them is really right. It might be at this point that I could mention that any tale about a man, a woman, and a serpent should really only be making you think of one relevant story, but we'll get to all this in due time. But for the record, I choose the serpent as the guilty one. After we advance forward, we get another kind of moved around scare where we get to see this. I'm not interested in beating around the bush. Pyramid Head is definitely meant to appear as if he's assaulting this mannequin thing. The way he moves, the way he stares down James, and the way he drags the limp corpse of another of the mannequins out of the room is, as with the rest of this game, not an accident, but it's difficult to know what to make of it. We know Pyramid Head is an antagonistic force, and there's absolutely no way he couldn't detect James behind the closet door, and yet after he tweaks a little bit, he leaves us be. We also find Mary's handkerchief in here. It's a bit odd, for sure, that it's in this room and not some other. After crossing a gap between buildings, we find ourselves in the infamous Otherworld for the first time. And I have to say, it does look really good, and of course by that, I mean horrifically disgusting. I've got a strong stomach, but there are some visuals in this game that definitely give you the, I really don't want to think about what this is for too long kind of feeling. But I appreciate it for using all elements of grossness, for lack of a better word. It isn't just scary because blood/bodily fluid, it's the aspect of utter rot and decay even in things like wallpaper and wood that makes the effect really sell. Analysis-wise, I don't have a ton to say about this section, but it's very effective. That and the previous point are pretty well emphasized by the toilet reach scene, after which Bloober lovingly remembered to stain James's hand with that muck for a while afterward. Also, sometimes when you're just going around in this game, it likes whispering at you and playing odd noises. They're always very well timed and always keep you sort of on edge even when you're pretty sure that the sounds aren't actually indicating imminent danger. There have also been a lot of these thus far, but I do kind of enjoy the memories of the previous game you can find around, like the bench for the old coin puzzle. I wouldn't have been upset if they weren't here, but I actually do think there's almost an in-game precedent for them existing, so I kinda like their inclusion. It's also in this Otherworld apartment where we find the girl again, who we discover to be named Angela. Every interaction between these two is thoroughly weird, as there's clearly always something off with Angela. The way she mutters about finding her mama, how she freaks out when James tries to take the knife, yet still does eventually give it to him, saying,
"Will you hold it for me?"
Sure. No problem.
If I kept it, I'm not sure what I might do.
We do have to wonder why it's already a bit bloody. I'm sure it's from the monsters. The real important thing she says, however, is that earlier line. We're all the same. She's right in some ways. We also get the return of the hole reach from the original game. As I've said, I'm not here for comparisons solely with the original game, so I actually just mention it because especially with the more modern infrastructure of the game, the presence and interactivity, normally requiring several button presses to do things like this, to reach into these horrific chasms, is pretty interesting, and it does help sell the effect. We also get our first proper hostile encounter with Pyramid Head once we finish a fairly long clock-based puzzle. And the fight, obviously, doesn't end with us defeating Pyramid Head. Alarms suddenly sound and he leaves, and amusingly enough, even if you don't fight him at all, you can still win the fight by just staying alive for long enough. Though this time he does make a concerted effort to kill you, there is some goal beyond that that'll draw him away from you, and really, that's the only reason you survive. After leaving, we see that kid again holding a letter.
You didn't love Mary anyway.
What? Hey, wait!
So there's a kid in here who knows Mary, but what's she doing in the town? How is she staying alive? Why does she seem to already know who we are? And she's not the only other relevant character we meet around this time, for we also encounter Maria, a mirror copy to Mary with a similar name, a similar voice, a similar face, yet different. Even after meeting Maria here, James just sort of wanders off to find Mary. Maria offers to help James find his and Mary's special place because it seems James just can't remember where it is, though he knows there is something. I nod once again towards the pay attention to James sign.
Wait. You're just gonna leave me here? Alone? With all these monsters around?
No, I just...
Is it because I remind you of her? You loved her, didn't you? Didn't you?
All right, just... Come on.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
Maria seems helpful, yet also a little flirty, maybe. Her whole existence here is really strange, but she's a properly friendly face, not so troubled as Angela, and not stuck throwing up like Eddie. She's a potential lifeline and becomes a companion for a time. We also encounter this statue around there, detailing a woman who was killed in a persecution by the blank-ins. It's blanked out on the text if you click to read it, but looking at the actual model of the statue, we can see the word is Christians. This, surprisingly, will be very relevant for a point later, one I doubt too many have made before, but I'm sure somebody has. But even now, one has to wonder what sort of thing would get one persecuted by a group so broad as Christians. It's not the Puritans or the Catholics or the Baptists or whatever, just Christians, broad scale. What was she a part of that set her so thoroughly against that group? We'll see. We end up in Jack's Inn next, mostly notable because it doesn't have much relevance to the original game and is much more a feature of Silent Hill 3, actually, which is probably why James doesn't like Room 106 where Heather Mason and Douglas once stayed. Maria doesn't seem to mind it, wanting to rest. And we also find our original outfit in one of these closets. When we go to save at a nearby car, we also discover that Maria doesn't see the save points, which is another of those easy to write off but probably does mean something kind of moments.
Hey, you okay? It's like you froze for a second.
Yeah,
There's also the Baldwin Estate, featured in the original Silent Hill 2's Born from a Wish DLC, where you play as Maria and explore this place, though not too much more I can say right now. There are also some notable interactions between James and Maria as you explore.
What will you tell her when you find her?
that... I love her.
Oh, then. Lucky her.
After dealing with a gauntlet of enemies, we end up at Heaven's Night, a bar and strip club Maria seems to have a lot of familiarity with, but we make our way inside to...
What? Come on, don't give me that look. I was just kidding.
What is this?
Maria once again wants to stop, to take a break here at Heaven's Night, which does make sense. We don't know why she's here, and she's in as much danger as us, but she pours him a drink, and James does not want any part of it. He is really very dedicated to his search for Mary, and I also just don't blame him for not wanting the drink. After seeing what we did in the apartment otherworld, I probably wouldn't want to touch anything from the... Well, when James goes to look at one of the posters, Maria's response feels very loaded.
Is that you?
Would you like it to be?
James also does say during this area that he feels this place is getting to him, which I'm mentioning for no reason. We leave with, no more delays, I need to find Mary. She is his guiding light. Speaking of guiding lights, we get to the garden area and Maria regales us of a tale of a woman exiled to an island within a lake who would hold a candle to guide her lover to her. One night during a storm, the light goes out and the man drowns in the sea. Every night thereafter, the woman came back with the light, hoping for the man's return. Even at this stage, we should be drawing some comparisons and making some conclusions about what this is about, but there will be more later too. We're drawn towards a new location by a scream that sounds like it came from the girl with the letter. We climb into the movie theater and here the girl is actually talking with Eddie. She questions why the cops are after Eddie, which is an odd thing to ask, and it also seems Eddie doesn't remember if he did anything bad to get the cops onto him to begin with. That's him, Angela, and us who seem to have trouble remembering details about what we're doing here. We speak to Eddie, who's devouring some ice cream, and he tells us the name of the little girl, Laura. He also gives us a very weird look.
It's probably just Laura messing around.
The little girl? Laura, is that her name?
That's what she said.
I'm gonna go look for her. You coming?
Now you want me to come with you?
Never mind.
Laura flees from us as we approach and runs out of the movie theater out towards Brookhaven Hospital, our next destination. And it's interesting that this is something James is willing to detour for. As I've been emphasizing, finding Mary has been his pretty much sole priority. So one must wonder if he wants to find Laura because she's a kid in a dangerous environment, or because it seems like she knows something about Mary. Of course, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. It's also interesting that the shotgun cabinet is where it is, because once again, we could write off the fact that we realize we're about to get a shotgun as a mid-game upgrade in terms of weapons, but there is of course an actual reason it's here. We find Laura in the stairway, but she runs away from us again. James knows she doesn't like him, but he doesn't know why. I remember thinking in this area that the hospital is just waiting to get otherworlded just because it's so bright outside the windows. We go into the basement and get the generator powered up so we can use the elevator. And of course, at the top of the elevator, the light is now gone. We're not yet in the other world, but things are definitely not going as logic might dictate. Who'd have guessed? Maria herself doesn't seem to be doing so hot, however, and for the third time now, wants to rest. And James lets her, and she just decides to stay in one of the patient rooms. Then there's this.
I wanted to ask you. What if you can't find Mary? What will you do?
I haven't really thought about that.
Get back soon, okay?
This hospital section is pretty extensive and really good. It's dark, oppressive, and being so big, it always feels like there's something behind you. Enemies are plentiful enough that you end up running from room to room, avoiding the gauntlet of death that the main hallways end up being. The main puzzle of this area centers around gathering wristbands from 3 particularly problematic patients, all of whom have conditions that inform the horrors we encounter. While not super relevant to the plot overall, it is pretty neat, and there's more flawless ambiance as well. I know I'm saying that too much, but this is my video and I can say what I want. After crawling around and falling through the floor, which was horrifying and I hated in the best possible way, would not recommend to claustrophobics, we do see a bit of Laura behind a metal gate. And considering even now she remains free to basically just draw on the walls and do whatever, it appears she's either very lucky or not playing by the same rules as us. I kinda doubt she's got a Glock she's taking out the monsters with. I won't talk about it too extensively because generally the hospital isn't majorly relevant in terms of the things you find around for the overall story, at least not relative to the other things I want to spend time on. This is the point at which the remake personally sold me relative to the OG. I've heard people say the hospital section is too long or fetch questy, but personally, I loved it. And aside from all that, there is something we do learn about the world of Silent Hill from the hospital, but we'll focus on it later because we don't want to put the cart before the horse. After a variety of adventures and puzzles, we end up back with the wristbands, first arranging them correctly, then ordering a number of books to help us solve a cipher, and then inputting that cipher into this weird machine. It's fun and very interactive. Opening that safe leads us to the rooftop, which allows allows us to find the disturbing diary as we saw in the original game, though its location is a bit different and is now required to progress. I read it and took some time to think about it before going to make my way. This one got me probably the most in the game. I really should have seen it coming, but it happened differently enough from the original game that I actually think my knowledge of the OG made it more effective than it would have been without that foreknowledge. When we do finally find Laura, she is not quick to tell us things, of course, and she detects that James will get mad if she withholds information from him.
What's the big deal?
Why can't you just tell me?
You gonna yell at me if I don't?
Laura is Mary's friend, she says, which immediately sets James off. He says she's lying and reacts almost violently. And then, of course, Laura hits him back with the infamous trick. She leads James into a back room where she says there's a letter waiting for him. And of course, there is no such letter, but there is a conveniently placed ceiling creature waiting to suck him up. With the door now locked by Laura, we deal with this mini boss fight. In this moment, and my first instinct upon this happening my first time playing the original, was to be upset with Laura. I mean, we're just looking for our wife, and we're constantly being set back and tricked by this random kid who seems able to avoid danger just because at every turn. We're sort of geared towards disliking her, but we did kind of deserve it, didn't we? I mean, James said he wasn't going to yell at her, but then, of course, he does almost immediately yell at her upon her suggesting that she knows Mary. Not even upon her withholding information, just saying something James doesn't think is actually true. So I guess it's fitting we end up thrust into this situation, is it not? The fight itself is a notable upgrade from the OG, and I actually do have some things to say about the game's combat. The boss fights are just way better. I know this isn't a comparison, and it's also not fair, because obviously combat in games is just sort of able to be more advanced now, especially in this genre, but this difference is relevant for a few things. Not this one, so I can let it play for you in the background while I talk about something else, though. One of the things that's most notable about combat in this game, also present in the original, but more visible here, is that in many survival horror games, or really in any game in which you're capable of fighting and defeating enemies, there is the aspect of you being able to impose your will upon the situation that you're in. I would say that generally speaking, the more confidently you can impose your will on the environment around you, the less scary the situation becomes. A great example there might be comparing Resident Evil 7 with Resident Evil 4. In 7, you're playing an absolutely normal guy who barely knows how to use weapons, and sure, you can fight off the mold things, but not always very confidently, and not in large numbers. And then, of course, when you actually do encounter the Baker family chasing you, you're essentially helpless. In Resident Evil 4, Leon Kennedy roundhouse kicks cultists and bug people like it's nobody's business. And you can generally shoot, stab, or explode the majority of problems you come across. The game ends, spoiler for like 5 seconds here, with you blowing up the boss with an RPG and then stabbing it really hard in a very dramatic way. But with Silent Hill 2, this one in particular, though it is true of the other Silent Hill games too, and I imagine will become even more true of the other entries in the series as they get their remakes, is that you're denied your ability to impose yourself upon the environment to the same degree. Even after downing and killing enemies, it doesn't really matter how much you kick them when they're down. Eventually, it starts to feel grotesque, like mutilation, and you stop. And the amount to which you kick down these enemies doesn't impact the fact that they can still get up if you linger in an area for too long. You cannot make this place bend to your will. You can try, but you aren't the one holding any of the cards. It's much in the same way that throughout this game, Pyramid Head has you completely at his mercy, and not only does he not choose to kill you, but you have no idea why you aren't being killed by him at any of these moments, and that's sort of scarier than if he was consistently trying to kill you and simply failed. But now we're in the Otherworld Hospital, which may be the grossest location in the game. There are goops and slimes and rust and decay and pools of blood and mucus and bile. It is no surprise that a decayed hospital is horrific, but horrific it is. There's also lots more eerie goodness. I like bringing these up as part of my analysis simply because doing the horror part of the horror game right is, a pretty crucial factor. The story being so well done is obviously kind of more important. It's the core of the experience. But if the actual horror element didn't work, a lot of this would fall flat. I mean, there's things like this weird breathing in the walls, weird random gasps from right behind you. And when something does jump scare you, it isn't because it makes some sudden loud sound or something jumps like into your screen. It's just that from the darkness, something decides to start killing you right then and there, and you have to react without jumping so much you screw up your chances of staying alive. And because they can come at any time out of the darkness, you're kept vigilant and on edge even in quieter sections. Now, as for the section we're in now, a lot of it is predicated around finding the codes to this box, which turns out to be empty. But opening it reveals the carved door and the ability to move back to the basement through the elevator. Right after you find one of the rings needed to get through the carved door, Maria finds you.
Maria, I thought... Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? I was almost killed back there. I have never been so scared in my whole life. All you care about is that dead wife of yours. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
No, I just...
Then stay with me. Don't leave me alone again. You're supposed to take care of me.
It's another strange interaction, but of course it does make sense. I'd be pretty distraught if I was Maria too. It's unclear how she survived or how she got to where she is. It begs the question, of course. So much of what we see is personalized to James, must be for James specifically and no other. So what's happening to the other people in here? We can assume Angela and Eddie are sort of on their own path because we don't see them super frequently. And it's hard to say anything for sure with Laura, but Maria? She's with us all the time and follows us around. It's just odd. Well, she's with us until Pyramid Head catches us in a hallway and Maria doesn't quite make it through the elevator door. Whatever our conclusions on what Maria was seeing may have been, they don't really matter anymore. James is clearly not doing too hot. Perhaps he focused too much on Mary and didn't care well enough for Maria. So much for being the one who's supposed to protect her, eh? We exit the other world and through the hospital window see Laura running out into the rain. Right next to that window, however, is a journal entry. It says, "The potential for this illness exists in all people, and under the right circumstances, any man or woman would be driven, like him, to the other side. It's true to us that his imaginings are nothing but the inventions of a busy mind, but to him there simply is no other reality. Furthermore, he is happy there. So why, I ask myself, must we drag him painfully into the world of our own reality?" This note is interesting in of its own right regarding the patients we've been seeing in the hospital, especially the particularly disturbed ones we collected the wristbands from, but what does it mean for us? And we may have also spoken a little soon about leaving the Otherworld Hospital because the whole town is otherworlded now. We find Neely's bar where we started the game, and there's a particularly wonderful message waiting for us on the wall. If you really want to see Mary, you should just die, but you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James. It's an odd thing to see, to say the least. One of the most direct things of its kind, leveling an accusation at James. I mean, we did sort of just let Maria die, but I mean, we tried to save her. So what does this mean? Who wrote it? We interact with Angela again, who seems to be physically fine, but, you know, she still hasn't found her mother. She doesn't think her mother wants to see her anymore, in fact. And when we offer to work together with her to leave Silent Hill, she doesn't even really understand what he means at first. And when we ask her whether she's seen Laura...
Oh, you didn't happen to see the little girl around here, did you?
A little girl?
Yeah, Angela? Are you all right? Angela?
No. Please. You shouldn't be here.
Angela, it's okay.
No, don't touch me!
While I've mostly been like, this interaction was strange, there is something even at this stage I can say. That Angela's lack of interest in leaving, even though it seems she's giving up the quest to find her mother, definitely hints at a key concept we've been building up. Namely that everyone experiences this town quite differently from one another. Who knows what Angela is seeing, but it'd explain why Laura doesn't seem to be in much actual danger. But with Maria, we fight our way to the town all the way to the statue of a veiled woman where we dig up the key to the historical society and a message that tells us it's been sealed for a long time and that should James not stop, the writer prays to the Lord to have mercy on his eternal soul. Given James presumably hasn't been here that long, this, of course, must have been done recently, if thinking in those terms is even relevant. In the Historical Society, we find not only this iconic art piece, but also the stairway. This stairway is very long and, of course, is much more than an inconvenience. It is a long descent deep into the bowels of the earth, impossibly deep, so thoroughly buried that the construction of anything so far down, much less this tunnel itself, would be prohibitively expensive and difficult. And yet, it is. And of course, from these depths, we enter the prison. How is this here? How are there windows? We are not meant to know. We find out the prison originated as a place for Civil War prisoners, which, considering Silent Hill is in Maine, I believe, would be a pretty far trip for them. A few rooms, however, is all it takes before the first of the pits. There is nothing to do but leap into this inky blackness. And the sound design, James's panicked breathing before he goes for it, chef's kiss. Another pit, and we're in the prison proper, where we find a man dead against a table, and Eddie. Eddie has a gun now. Shot the guy. Or did he? The little bit of callousness we saw in him at the movie theater has definitely morphed into something else. The cops having pursued him here making more sense by the moment. The main body of the prison that we enter thereafter involves collecting weights so the various doors can be unlocked, with the eventual goal of collecting them all so that a big scale can be balanced perfectly and something done with the gallows at the center of a massive pitch black chamber. This all of course leads us to explore the prison, and so within we find a little chapel with the following relevant lines. The prisoners do not feel themselves to be sinful at all. They dream blissfully, the sinners that they are, for no matter how foul and loathsome one's existence may be, human nature abides. After acquiring the rifle, we find a series of interesting notes regarding what's happening in the prison. One states that prisoners are disappearing from their cells and bathrooms are being barricaded from the inside. A disease breaks out amongst the inmates. The warden affirms the patient's sickness and the investigations that are being conducted into it, even over other priorities. And yet, as tests are being taken on these supposedly sick prisoners, it's found that there's no actual sickness at all, with the back of that particular note asking why the experiments are even being done to begin with. I mention these notes in particular because they help establish something about this world that'll be useful when we put the pieces together. With all the weights collected, we now have another puzzle to solve, the hangman puzzle. It was my favorite in the OG, and it's quite good here too. Putting together tales of criminals and telling you to detect the one who was justified. The puzzle itself could demand its own video because there are tons of variants on it dependent on difficulty, and the puzzle randomizes itself each playthrough, and each entry, I think, is meant to reflect on a character we recognize from the game. But considering that the puzzle revolves around matching 6 finishing stanzas to 6 beginning stanzas, and the variants in the finishing stanzas include whether each of the 6 is meant to be guilty or innocent, and there's variants for both, it comes out to the game not making any super definitive statements in of itself, so we'll probably move on. But all that is said to say that this is probably the most full and complete puzzle in the game, especially because it'll actually be different after multiple playthroughs. Either way, selecting the correct one results in yet another descent, another hallway, another descent, and then a great long rickety elevator that takes us yet further down, further descent. And yet, in the almost domestic hallways that follow, we hear a familiar voice. When we find her, we're confronted by this horrible, horrible thing. Abstract Daddy is what it's called. Its attacks largely consist of it running up and trying to kill you in its dark embrace. It takes the form of 2 people, one on top of the other, and every bad thought you're having about what this all could mean is likely accurate, but will be elaborated upon a little more once all the pieces are collected. When the fight ends, Angela is distraught, to say the least. She still fears us, and all of what she says is strange, but none more than
Admit it. You didn't want her around anymore.
No.
You probably found someone else.
No!
I need to find my mama.
I also really have to say here that the delivery of these lines, the way the facial expressions are done, it's all just so good. James denies what Angela says, but he lacks confidence. One can't help but remember all of his oddities in his attitude, down to the shaking hands in the mirror from the very beginning. We're allowed to continue yet further into the labyrinth to be greeted by This visual is so effective to me because it's one where you sort of have to stare at it for a bit before it becomes clear what you're even looking at. And you don't like it much more once that realization hits. It's just so wonderfully strange. I'm typically one to say that a focus on graphics or graphical improvements, especially in remasters, are not substantively important in actually affecting the thing's quality. But there are moments like this where I don't think that rule holds true. Not far down the hallway, however, we find something even more odd.
Maria? Maria! I thought that thing killed you. Are you hurt?
Not at all, silly.
But the thing... It stabbed you. There was blood everywhere.
Stabbed me? What do you mean?
It chased us to the elevator and then...
James, what are you talking about?
Just before. Don't you remember?
James? Honey? Did something happen to you?
Notice how she calls him honey. She asks if he's confusing her with someone else, which is a really weird question for Maria of all people to be asking. Even more damning is, it doesn't matter who I am, I'm here for you, James.
I'll find some way to... I'll come back, I promise.
James is conflicted and reacting very unsure of himself, and why wouldn't he? He's watched Maria die, and yet here she is perfectly alive, more forward than ever, inexplicably trapped in a cell. We've seen how this place can warp reality and make things that shouldn't be possible, yet happening this way, killing one person to affect another, it doesn't seem like it should be in its purview. And Maria doesn't seem so capable of being direct about who she is, and James is seemingly increasingly aware of that. Yet, for all the strangeness, we don't want to leave her here, do we? So we pursue the end of the labyrinth, and at a point, find the Minotaur at its center. But before that, there are 3 sections to this labyrinth accessed from this spinning cube puzzle. The first is the rotten area filled with bugs and those great monsters. While this area is effective in of itself, there's a little bit to it I want to acknowledge that it'd be easy to overlook. This desk, which James even acknowledges with a "the hell?" It's an odd, almost random seeming thing, not that out of place with its environment, but definitely not belonging either. Why is it here? It comes without explanation. There's no note directly explaining its presence, but I do have a bit of a theory we'll get to later. Following this is the desolate area in which we find the Minotaur in the labyrinth, who, even once we're safe from him, merely stares. He stalks us, even in places we don't expect. But after we escape him, we end up in the final of these areas, the ruined area. It's essentially an enemy gauntlet in which we have to survive a series of rooms by either clearing all enemies or staying alive for a certain amount of time before moving on. We get more of this guy, and have to crawl through the wall of limbs to get away. At the end of the resulting hallway, we see that perhaps things are even less like we expected.
Maria.
James doesn't take her sudden extra death well, though it goes unexpected. It makes sense in the way that she should already be dead, and it's no surprise she's been gotten again. Perhaps the her we saw not long ago was merely an illusion. Either way, at the end, James again returns to his true goal, his candle in the darkness. We move onward towards the limb wall from the beginning. Pyramid Head's sword carries us through, causing the appendages to withdraw. We ascend to move forward for the first time in a while, only to actually descend, then go into the graveyard room. In here are the graves of Walter Sullivan from earlier, as well as Angela and Eddie, and of course, us. James Sunderland is a name that was not chosen on accident. I'll let that one hang there as we drop down yet another hole. We meet Eddie again, and he's not so happy to see us this time. His true nature becomes quite clear here, and it turns into this.
It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And a corpse can't laugh.
James lambasts Eddie for his violence, but this town called us too. And if it calls people like Eddie, and Angela herself has proven unstable, what does that mean for James? So now Eddie is dead. James's hands shake once again. It's always a little hard to tell how literal the things that have been happening to us are, especially with what we've seen with Maria, but we killed Eddie. That doesn't seem very ambiguous to me. We row towards the light on Toluca Lake, which should be reminding you of a story from earlier, and we land at the hotel where we stayed with Mary once. Within the hotel, we find Laura once again, and she's a little more willing to talk this time. It's here we find out why Laura knew Mary. They were at the same hospital and became friends, and this letter really hits hard.
My dearest Laura, I'm leaving this letter with Rachel to give to you after I'm gone. I'm far away now, in a quiet, beautiful place. Please forgive me for not saying goodbye before I left. Be well, Laura. Don't be too hard on the sisters. And Laura, about James. I know you hate him because you think he isn't nice to me, but please, give him a chance. It's true, he can be a little surly sometimes, and he doesn't laugh much. But underneath, he's a really sweet person. I love you, Laura. I love you like my very own daughter. I wish things were different. I wish we could be happy together, like we talked about. Even so, I know you will have a good life. You're a strong, smart, beautiful girl. Happy 8th birthday, Laura. Your friend, Mary.
Now we understand a lot more, especially the fact that James acted far too quickly to not believe her earlier. But then he asks this.
How old are you?
I turned 8 last week.
Does that mean Mary couldn't have died 3 years ago? Could she really be here?
Mary couldn't have died 3 years ago. We'll be coming back to that. And now we find there was actually another letter, one that Laura had, but unfortunately seems to have lost. And yet here, something I expected James might yell at her for, here he doesn't. He's bewildered, clearly upset she lost the letter, yet he doesn't react very poorly. And that's pretty important, especially now. Now we're in the hotel, and our goal is to make it to room 311, where we once stayed with Mary here in Silent Hill. This mostly revolves around finding the 3 princess statues for a music box, much like we saw in the original games. One of my favorite details both there, and it will come to be here. And we also find Mary's medical patient record on the table in one of these rooms, though we don't seem able to actually look inside. Deeper into the hotel, upon opening up a fireplace to look for one of the statuettes, we partake in an entirely new boss fight. It came completely by surprise, and as with the other boss fights in the game, was pretty good. But one of the other most interesting things in this section is the extremely low tolerance elevator, where you have to dump every single one of your items, even your flashlight, to be able to take it down. This leaves you to wander essentially helplessly through several areas, which is a lot of fun and disrupts any level of comfort you'd have from getting more skilled at actually fighting enemies, because now you can't. With the final princess statuette collected, we solve a 2-stage puzzle to get get the music box working and are greeted with probably my favorite ambiance in the game. I don't know why, but I just love it. It's so haunting yet slightly romantic, happy but with these hints of darkness. It fits so well because the overall effect is foreboding, as just after you open it, the path to James and Mary's hotel room is cleared. Once we make it to the hotel room, we discover it to be empty, just a VCR for the VHS tape we collected earlier. And yet when we put it in,
Are you taping again? Come on. I don't know why, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. It's too bad we have to leave. Promise you'll take me again, James?
When I discovered this for the first time in the original game, it was probably one of the most crushing revelations in any game I'd ever played, any story I'd experienced. Laura's rage at James is completely justified. The ways she's fooled us are now justified in a way we never could have understood before. Now we know why we're here. This is a punishment, a purgatory, and it's just so perfectly done, down to the horrible whimper from Laura as she runs away from the room. It's no wonder the hotel gets otherworlded afterward, and we become tempted by Mary's voice again, James feeling the last shreds of hope. So few pieces of media are willing to play you like this, to have a character who has done something so thoroughly wrong and hint towards it just enough that you know something is wrong, might even be hazarding the correct guess before the truth is properly revealed, but then just hit you with it. No punches pulled nor immediate attempts to explain or justify what your protagonist did. This game leaves you to reel and reckon. There's no easy answer, and now we're close to the end. We're close to that reckoning and my attempt to explain this game, its endings, and which of those James truly deserves for his crime. And part of that explanation even comes from this biblical verse we find. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from my sight. From Isaiah 1:16. That verse as well ends with another line that's blacked out but does still exist as part of this. Cease to do evil. It's all very relevant for us, especially after our discovery of having done that evil. We also have our last encounter with Angela. She mistakes James for her mother, the last one left before she can rest. She thanks us for helping her earlier, but then says,
Even Mama said it. I deserve what happened.
No, Angela, that is not true.
Don't pity me. I'm not worth it. Or maybe you think you can save me? Will you love me? Care for me? Heal all my pain? That's what I thought.
She asks for the knife back, but James refuses. She says he's saving it for himself. She's already been in hell. It seems James is just now feeling it. We have the information to put Angela's story together at this point, and there's no better time to do it than now. We discover from a newspaper article, combined with her having the knife, her hatred for a creature called Abstract Daddy, the fact that she reacts very strangely to James looking for a little girl, that Angela killed her father and likely not only her brother as well, but also her mother, who she seems so insistent on finding. While it's essentially stated the father was sexually assaulting her, it's implied the brother did as well, and the mother at least sort of enabled that behavior. So Angela killed all of them. And yet, in her being here searching for her mother, much like James searched for Mary, who he too killed, it seems perhaps her mother was more a victim than it might seem. And we'll soon find out to what degree Mary was or was not the same. We know the end is nigh when James approaches the grid of red squares, seen everywhere in this game as save points and even binding the mouths of the corrupted nurses. In the save screen, James now avoids his gaze in the mirror. We're brought to a great chamber where Maria is hanging upside down in the captivity of 2 pyramid heads, killed for a 3rd time. James screams out in rage. It's time to kill he who has stalked us this entire time, the Minotaur at the center of the labyrinth.
I know what you are. I know why I needed you. But it's all over now. I don't need you anymore.
This is probably James's single most interesting lines. He knows why the Pyramid Head stalked him. He knows he doesn't need him, but he doesn't say why. That'll be for us to interpret shortly. Even in our success in the boss fight, it's not us to defeat the Pyramid Heads, to prostrate them before us by our own power. They merely give in and end themselves once we've damaged them enough. And that's because, for no matter what, we remain not the one in charge. The following hallway allows us to hear James and Mary's presumably last conversation, and we discover Mary herself was not perfect. She yells at and lambasts James. It's hard to listen to because it's real. Even Mary, the victim, was not perfect, was not the flawless wife to James's evil husband.
What do you want, James? Flowers? I don't want any dead flowers. Just go home already. Look at me. I'm disgusting. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here. Leave me alone already. I'm no use to anyone. I'll be dead soon anyway. It'd be easier if they just killed me. But I guess the hospital's making a nice profit off of me. Why are you still here? I told you to go. Are you deaf? Don't come back. James. Wait. Please. Don't go. Don't leave me alone. I didn't mean what I said. Please. Tell me I'll be okay. Tell me I'm not gonna die. Help me.
We climb a great metal grate and we get a conversation with Mary, though it depends on the ending. We'll start with this one.
I have missed you so much.
I've missed you too. We can finally be together. Forever.
No.
James. Honey. What's wrong?
I'm sorry. I know you tried,
James, please.
but she's gone. I know that now,
Stop it.
and I can't just keep pretending.
Shut up!
What do you want? Do you even know anymore?
I'm yours. I'm here for you. So what if I'm not her?
I can give you what she never could. I can be better than her. What else do you want me to be? What else can I be?
I am so sorry, Maria. I really am. But this has to stop. It's time to let it go.
No.
What?
I won't let you do this to me. I won't let you go.
I can't!
And before I show you the boss fight, before we talk about the endings, we're going to finally do that big loop around. Because now, of course, we understand Maria. Maria was, as that old DLC suggested, born from a wish, an entity from Silent Hill meant to tempt James. You might have noticed that James resists Maria by muttering Mary to himself, but it also distracts himself from his situation. So now I'm going to tell you that thing I think about this game that you've probably never heard elsewhere. This will be a bit of a long digression, but I promise it'll be worth it. In 1931, F. Scott Fitzgerald, most famous for The Great Gatsby, wrote a little short story called Babylon Revisited. It details a man, Charlie Wales, who returns to Paris where he vacationed with his wife during the good times before the stock market crash. He's back now with more money and no longer the drunkard wastrel he'd been in those years. He talks of affairs in a local bar between two neighboring establishments, the Cafe of Heaven and the Cafe of Hell. He goes to see his friends, the Peters, who've been caring for his daughter during his interim of being said drunkard wastrel. Now he's mostly put himself back together and goes out to lunch with his daughter. He offers her gifts, a trip to the toy store where she can buy anything she wants, alongside a trip to an exhibition. Her daughter wants the exhibition, but not the toys, and he doesn't understand why. Later, he goes to talk to the Peters and petition them for the release of his daughter back into his care. Lincoln Peters, the husband, is pretty willing. Charlie's much better to do and recognizes why things went the way they did. Up to a certain point. Lincoln's wife, Marion, does not forgive Charlie because what she remembers is something that Charlie did. Charlie locked his wife out in the cold and she developed pneumonia and died as a result, an act he committed after she was caught kissing another man. In the end, after Charlie's friends from the party days show up at the door and try to take him drinking, it doesn't matter how emphatically he rejects their advances, Marion sees that this part of Charlie's past is returning to him, detects the fact that Charlie doesn't recognize why his daughter didn't want the gifts and just wanted to spend time with him, and thus Marion refuses the return of Charlie's daughter. If you haven't put it together already, this short story is thoroughly similar to Silent Hill 2, and while it is admittedly not that well known outside academic circles, it's so remarkably comparable to the game, it'd be incredible if it was a coincidence. But explaining this will help explain the game. Charlie and James are obviously analogous. Husbands return to repent for their sins and hope for the return of a daughter. Honoria in Charlie's case, Laura in James's. Both haven't spent much time with their daughter figure and are contested for how worthy they are of her. Charlie being in between the cafes of heaven and hell is an obvious nod to purgatory, and if there is something to call the experience of James in Silent Hill, it is his purgatory, his realization and atonement for sin. We can figure out he likely killed Mary no longer than a week before the game starts, given Laura's statements about her age, as opposed to 3 years ago. Silent Hill sucked James in to repent for what he did right as soon as the deed was done, just about. Both James and Charlie killed their wives. James did it more directly, sure, but both are responsible. And both their wives are implied to be quite imperfect themselves, even if they still are victims. Charlie's situation is complicated by his wife's infidelity, James's by Mary's verbal abuse and the fact she was suffering already, and near the end of a long, painfully unsuccessful treatment. Though both James and Charlie are killers, neither is clear-cut in their degree of guilt. The only difference is that, in my opinion, James is capable of learning his lesson, and in doing so achieving the best and, literarily, most appropriate ending. That final hallway leads us to the final boss fight, and that boss fight takes on a number of slight variants depending on which ending you're getting. And for dramatic effect, I'll introduce this concept, and then we're going back through the game. Through some of those things I've said would come up later, and then we're going to cover the worst and arguably least canon ones first, also I can build up and explain why only one ending is true. All the way at the beginning, we now understand that even if Silent Hill sapped James's memories, put him in this brain fog where he lost awareness of his crime, that a part of him still knows something is wrong with him. That's why his hands shake and his eyes are shadowed in the mirror. We of course understand now why Angela is strange even from the beginning. She was called like us and fails to remember what she did just like us. We both lack knowledge of our circumstances at that stage. And these hints go back far, even to this note from the very beginning, which I think is from the entity that is or spawned Maria, and it's to James. I mean, it could just be coincidence, it may not be entirely literal, but if we want to connect it to anyone, there's no real question. We can also return to the coin puzzle. Remember the man, the woman, and the serpent, and the one we were to decree as the sinful one? Well, obviously we're dealing with a Garden of Eden situation here. Essentially, the golden rule of media analysis is that if there's ever a snake around a guy and a girl, you're looking for the Eden example. But even if you, for some reason, don't believe me on this specific one, just look at all the other sort of Christian symbolism present in the game. And here, where it asks you to select for the guilty one, it's an interesting inversion. Some consider Eve to be at fault for what happened in the Garden of Eden, but of course Adam also partakes of the forbidden fruit. The source of original sin in Christian theology is, of course, the serpent, Satan. Thus, selecting the serpent as the most guilty one not only makes the most sense, it also contributes towards that one correct ending, because a lot of your actions impact which ending you get, of course. We also now understand a lot more of what's going on with Angela and Eddie. Both are being punished by Silent Hill for their own crimes, though Angela's are more understandable. Her struggles seem to mostly be with her murdering her mother as well, alongside the other two, and her inability to reconcile that fact. Eddie, of course, is a fair bit simpler. Though he does seem to be mentally unwell, that doesn't justify the types of murders he was taking part in, no matter how much he was mocked or teased. I also want to mention that there is something we generally learn about the world of Silent Hill from the hospital section. Silent Hill 2 is definitely lighter on the broader scale picture world building of Silent Hill than 1 or 3 are, but there are still things worth mentioning, especially since we're trying to look at this game as a whole, and a lot of it surrounds the general, what is the entity/force that put James on this journey question. Because, of course, we know some power beyond James himself caused the game to work the way it does, even if to an extent that it's reflective of his own consciousness. Part of that we can see in both the hospital and prison sections. Most notably, with that note at the end of the hospital section that talks about the other world a patient crosses over to. While not explicitly supernatural outside of its context, within the context of Silent Hill, it definitely alludes to this tormented soul crossing over to the other world. Considering as well how often this town, which really isn't all that big, suffers from serial killers, the violently mentally ill, and then of course all of the weird shit we've been reading about from the prison, it points me towards the following conclusion, that to an extent, earlier on in Silent Hill's history, the true nature of this town was unknown to its inhabitants, but its true nature still expressed itself through the disappearing inmates and the violence. Eventually, people do discover the truth of Silent Hill, or at least the way they perceive it, but kind of keep it on the down low. The interesting thing here is that with all the biblical imagery, and even with that statue that mentions persecution by Christians, that evidently for some reason is not a problem anymore, that leads me, even with this game's context alone, to believe that Silent Hill is essentially a portal to hell. A lot of people gave into it and became the cultists exists that we don't see much of in this game, but know exist, and some from outside the town are drawn here. But despite the obvious evil at the core of Silent Hill that causes these violent outbursts, there's a surprising amount of agency retained by the people drawn here, and an odd amount of opportunities to reflect and attempt to better oneself. Things like that verse from Isaiah that encourage the reader to wash themselves, to make themselves clean. Remove the evil of your deeds from my sight. Cease to do evil. That, to me, is the strongest evidence towards the true nature of Silent Hill. Let's briefly return to my comparison to Babylon Revisited, which, though I didn't mention this until now, is named pretty intentionally in the sense that Babylon, biblically, is a place of evil. Silent Hill is much the same, and much as Charlie is figuratively in purgatory, James is quite literally in a form of purgatory. He cannot be conquered by evil, by Satan against his will, because Satan has no power of his own, only the ability to manipulate and to lead one to commit evil acts. He could not force Jesus to jump down the cliff and wait for God to save him during the 40 days and nights of temptation. He could only attempt to convince Jesus to do so, for example. Evil acts themselves have to come from the hands of a person. Yet being in purgatory, there's also a chance to confess, repent of one's sins, and come out the other side absolved. We also see some of this reflection in things that happen to James. I mentioned that desk earlier, and to me, the desk seems to be a sort of reflection of the life that he had before he came here. I could see it in one sense being a reflection of sort of boring 9-to-5 life, but also maybe of the sort of stability of things before he came to Silent Hill. But of course, the biggest one is all to do with Pyramid Head. He says he doesn't need Pyramid Head anymore by the end of the game, but I think the way he means it really depends on which ending you're getting. In the better endings, which I'll tell you now, even though I'm getting slightly ahead of myself, the way I think he means that is that Pyramid Head is the sort of the weight of his sins, the subconscious knowledge of the things he's done wrong. It's the burden that he's carrying that's preventing him from moving forward. And when he says he doesn't need Pyramid Head anymore, it means not that he's giving up the burden of those sins, that he's not thinking about them or doesn't feel guilty anymore, but that he doesn't need to be tormented by them anymore. But in regards to how easy it is to give into this evil that we see the opportunity for so often in the game and that other characters do, to accept what Silent Hill wants to make you into, that's what happens to the other characters. Angela gives into despair. Eddie decides violence really is the answer. All three, between Angela, Eddie, and James, have let the devil on their shoulder convince them to do evil before their arrival. And now that they're here, the devil returns, and it seems only James has the potential to not give in, to learn his lesson. Now we can finally discuss the endings. As promised, the worst is first. In this ending, we meet Mary at the top of the staircase and do the final boss fight. And this boss fight is great, and even in the altered form of Mary being a sort of desecrated nun, there is some symbolism in it being a corruption of religion. And this ends as such.
What is this?
Is what you've been looking for.
Let's go.
Better do something about that cough.
If you've been paying attention to what's been happening and the way I've been saying things, it should be fairly clear why this is the worst ending. But establishing why also does help clear up some things for the following ones. Throughout this video, I have tried pretty hard to tip my hat towards Maria's suspiciousness, her odd forwardness, the mystery of where she came from and why she looks like Mary, all that sort of thing. Her whole visual design is even meant to be that of a less modest, more potentially tempting person. She isn't here on accident. Every other adult here did something terrible, as we discover by the end of the game, so it's not like she's some random exception. Only by denying our eyes and ears can we possibly think that Silent Hill was really just a scary dating show, and James can walk out of here with his new girlfriend Maria, not reckoning for the evil he did. That cough she has at the end, James's oddly callous response, it's just repeating the cycle. As soon as he gets in that car and drives away, the fog is probably going to surround him and he'll end up back at this overpass, get out, go to the bathroom, his hands will be shaking, touching his face. Maria is literally Satan, or Silent Hill's equivalent, whichever you prefer. She's the temptress, the one who constantly tries to get James to stop, to rest, to be distracted from his quest for Mary. While James does often say Mary's name to dissociate from his situation or to stop thinking about Maria, that quest, that candle on the island lighting his way, also keeps him from falling to Maria, unless you get this ending, which requires you to constantly choose things that indicates he isn't learning his lesson. Choosing the ripe apple instead of the rotten apple at a mirror puzzle in the hotel, constantly coming to check back up on her in the hospital, being too quick to save her when she follows you and starts taking damage. Games condition you to trust your companions implicitly, but that's what makes Maria's deceit so effective. It almost doesn't occur to you to not trust her unless you start really paying attention. But this, of course, is not the only bad ending. The next worst, I guess, is called Rebirth, and it can only be gotten on a New Game Plus save. It requires you to gather a bunch of arcane artifacts, then finish the game as usual, leading to this confrontation with Mary, who, I should mention, is actually Maria, especially in the Maria ending where James doesn't figure out that that's the case.
James. What's wrong? Aren't you happy to see me?
I'm sorry. I know what you are, Maria.
What does it even matter? I am here for you.
You're not her.
She's gone, and she's not coming back.
You're wrong. There's a way. I can still bring her back.
What? No, that's not true.
But before I do, I need to kill that part of me that still clings to you.
Who the hell do you think you are? You don't get a say in this. Not anymore. Like it or not, I am here now. And I won't let it end like this.
Mary. You look so peaceful. Forgive me for waking you. But without you, I just can't go on. This town, Silent Hill. The old gods haven't left this place. And they still grant power to those who venerate them. Power to defy even death.
So I could almost see someone arguing for this one. They'd be wrong, I think, but I could almost see it. It's easy to explain, though. If I phrase it to you this way, it should be pretty clear. James collects artifacts from the devil-worshipping Silent Hill cult to perform a ritual of necromancy on the body of his dead wife, which we now know he's just had with him. It's probably at this point worth mentioning that the game starts much like I suggested, the Maria ending concludes. I bet James drove out of Silent Hill with Mary's body only to be consumed by the fog and have his memories cleared, thus starting the game and introducing the delusion of the 3-year gap between now and Mary's death. But But regarding this ending, Rebirth, I think we know enough about the cult of Silent Hill and the general evil of the powers that be here to conclude that becoming a necromancer is probably not going to lead to a happy ending for James, especially since that too would not involve him actually learning his lesson. The next worst ending is an interesting one, as it ends way sooner in the game, and it's called Bliss. If you acquire the requisite materials when you go to put in the videotape that would normally result in you finding out that you killed Mary, and you take one of those requisite materials, you instead see this.
Are you taping again? Come on. I don't know why, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. It's too bad we have to leave. Promise you'll take me again, James.
I promise.
Come on, we need to finish packing. James, honey, did something happen?
Oh, no, it's fine. Everything's fine.
It almost makes it seem like this whole trip in Silent Hill was an illusion, that you never actually killed Mary, that you've returned with her to the past, so you won't make the same mistake. And if you take it at face value, that's it. This is the happiest ending. You prevent the crime that caused you to go here to begin with, but it's placed here on purpose. The item you have to use to get this ending is called White Claudia. Its item description says, this will make it alright, for a special time, for a special place. The problem is that White Claudia is something we know about from Silent Hill 1. It's a hallucinogenic. So what actually happens? James drinks this weird concoction, hallucinates that he didn't actually kill Mary, and then, considering credits roll, presumably dies. He may perish in a moment of happiness, but that happiness is a lie. Silent Hill is about redemption and atonement, and pretending you don't need either is not going to work. Following that are two endings I can stitch together, and this, of course, is where my opinion may be slightly controversial, because I've seen it regarded that the next ending, and the one attached to it, is either the true canon ending or co-canon with the last one, and I disagree. So let's get into it. The opening scene to this one and the one I think is canon are the same, interestingly, and very important. Here James realizes the illusion that the Mary he finds is actually, of course, Maria. James knows he cannot pretend he'll still be finding Mary. Following the boss fight, we get this.
I miss you so much. I tried. I really did, but I can't. Just can't forgive myself for what I've done.
James decides he cannot go on without Mary, that he cannot forgive himself. He takes responsibility, which is important, but he chooses to and the full letter from Mary is read, which I'll save for just a moment. Before I can explain why I don't think this is the correct ending, I first need to say that this one, called In Water, is augmented by a further stillness ending in New Game Plus, in which Mary does reach out to James in the car and the letter isn't read. But I also think I need to show you the last ending before we actually conclude. As said, the prelude is the same, but the conclusion...
James. James.
Mary.
Hey, handsome.
I'm sorry.
Don't be. I told you. I wanted the pain to end.
Yeah. You did. But that's not why I did it. The truth is, I hated you. I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
If that's true, then why do you look so sad?
Mary.
It's okay, James. Here.
What is this?
It's what you've been looking for.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday. But you never did. Well, I'm alone there now. In our special place. Waiting for you to come and see me. But you never do. So, I wait. Wrapped in my cocoon of pain and loneliness. I know I've done a terrible thing to you. I wish I could change that, but I can't. I feel so pathetic and ugly laying here. Every day I stare up at the cracks in the ceiling, and all I can think about is how unfair it is. The doctor came today. Told me I could go home for a short stay. It's not that I'm getting better. It's just that this could be my last chance. Even so, I'm glad to be coming home. I missed you so much. But I'm afraid, James. I'm afraid you don't really want me to come home. Every time you come to see me, I can tell how hard it is on you. I don't know if you hate me or pity me. Maybe I just disgust you. I'm so sorry. When I first learned I was gonna die, I couldn't accept it. I was so angry. I struck out at everyone I loved. Especially you. And that's why I understand if you hate me. But I want you to know, I will always love you. Even though our life together had to end like this, I still wouldn't trade it for the world. Well, this letter has gone on too long, so I'll say goodbye. I told the nurse to give this to you after I'm gone. Which means that as you're reading this, I'm already dead. But that's okay. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I just hope the pain will end soon, so that you remember me for who I was, and not what the disease made me. I want you to go on. I want you to live for yourself and for others, like you did for me. James, you made me happy.
Both of these last two endings hit very hard emotionally. Either James believes the weight of his sin is too great, or he chooses to move on. The argument for the first's ending, the in-water one as I understand it, would be that it does include James atoning for what he did, the biggest prerequisite for a correct ending. However, I personally think it's too self-destructive. He gives in to despair pretty much the same way Angela does, and in my opinion, we're meant to learn from both Eddie and Angela. They both fail to learn their lesson from Silent Hill, and we're meant to not make the same mistakes. Eddie gives in to the temptations of Silent Hill through his gluttony for both food and violence, as we see throughout the game. And much like the Maria or even Rebirth ending is for Eddie, Angela, in my opinion, shows us why In Water and Stillness are not the correct endings. She seems resolved to end her own life, to give in to the despair and dissolution that Silent Hill tries to impart in equal measure. And should we choose In Water, we're doing no different. James's sin was terrible. He should never feel fully redeemed of it, should never feel entirely okay about it, but it was a complicated act. Mary was verbally abusive and suffering. James had no choice but to watch his wife die slowly, and he snapped. He couldn't take it anymore and now feels the full weight of the evil of stripping even just those few final days from Mary. James said he did it because he hated her and wanted her life back, but Mary in the Leave ending cutscene, who I do personally believe to actually be Mary or a reflection of her in some way, because I do believe Silent Hill can manifest some good things due to its status as purgatory and thus not fully under control of the devil or what have you. Digression aside, Mary does say that if what James said was true, he wouldn't be so thoroughly defeated, so thoroughly sad. And then, of course, there's the angle in the Leave ending that Laura isn't actually forgotten about in this one. Her status in this is unclear, as the child James and Mary never could nor did get to have. The need for her presence is symbolized as far back as that baby carrier with the serpent coin inside, evil stealing away their chance for a kid. But now, James can take Laura away from here. She's being held here safe from danger, but without a home, and now she can be allowed to have an actual life, though what that may look like we may never know. Only by reconciling his sin, facing the only other living person so thoroughly hurt by his evil, and choosing to move forward, bearing that weight but not giving into it, does James escape Silent Hill. And not only is that far, far more powerful than the ending of In Water, but with such brilliance on display regarding atonement and redemption, I find it highly unfitting for the conclusion for the correct answer to be suicide. So that's Silent Hill 2. This is a behemoth, a monument of a game. And I hope I told you at least something you didn't already know about it. I hope one day I can make something as good as this, but for now I'm happy to just analyze it. I still barely know what I'm doing with this new JBart channel, but I know this is where the best stuff I make is going. If this sounds like a place you want to be, we have a Discord if you want to hang out with my editor and I, and a Patreon if you're crazy enough to want it. As we close out, I'd like to thank our patrons: Shadowrunner, Sani, Isaac Parrott, Raymond, Don, Sadako, and Cavalier of the Knights of the Inner Circle, Vion, Jodion Void, and Razor the Arcader, our knights, and Greer, TOW, and Craig, our loyal squires.